Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I hope you're all doing so well. Welcome back to another video. Now tonight, it's Friday, not my usual upload day, but tonight I am bringing you a Friday night fright. This is a new little series that I'm starting my channel. If you are a regular here, you know I do true crime every single week. Once a week, sometimes twice a week, always uploading on a Sunday. But I love all things horror. And I have found a Reddit story that is living rent-free in my mind. Nothing much creeps me out. I can watch any horror film, I can hear any story, and it's very rare that something would shake me, leave me feeling a bit uneasy. But this story absolutely does. If true crime is your jam, if paranormal crazy stories are your jam, I highly suggest you subscribe, get that notification bell on, because I'm here for you every single week. Without any further rambling and any further ado, let's get into this creepy ass story from Reddit No Sleep. So this story is by MaliaGirl1314 on Reddit. The title is, "My wife has been peeking at me from around corners and behind furniture. It's gone from weird to terrifying." My wife Lynn and I have been together for 6 years and married for 11 months. Our entire history together has been very normal, and never once have I noticed any weird behaviours or red flags. I can't stress enough how out of character this whole thing is for her. Lynn is very kind, intelligent and thoughtful. She's always been the no-nonsense type of person. Being childish or trying to scare me is not something she'd normally do. She doesn't even like watching horror movies. Can't relate, love a horror movie. When we first started dating, she had agreed to watch The Shining with me because she knew how much I love horror. She was so scared she didn't even make it halfway through the movie before we had to turn it off. She isn't into anything creepy and has never been into pranks. It's just not her cup of tea, and that's fine. But that's what was so strange about this. It's just so unlike her. I should also add that she never had any mental health issues, and as far as I'm aware, it doesn't seem to run in her family. I know some people are able to hide their mental health problems, but in the 6 years that we've been together, I think I'd have seen some sort of sign. So 2 months ago, I was in the kitchen making myself some coffee before work. I was running a bit late that morning and I knew I wouldn't be able to make it to Dunkin' Donuts for my usual coffee. So I take a sip of the coffee that I've made as I hurried down the hall towards the front door, when I happened to notice Lynn peeking at me from around the corner ahead of me. At this point, I could only see her eyes and a strand of long dark hair hanging against the wall. The rest of her body was concealed behind the corner. I nearly spilled my coffee when I saw her, and I burned the hell out of my lips. "Geez, Lynn," I said, wiping a few drops of coffee from my pants. "You scared the crap out of me." She immediately popped out of view like a little kid that had been caught. I heard her scurry off towards the living room, and by the time I got to the front door, she was out of sight. It was really weird and just totally out of character for Lynn, like I said, but I also found it kind of funny that she was being more playful, more childlike, not taking everything so seriously. I shouted that I loved her and I called her a weirdo. As I shut the door behind me, I heard her laugh. Now, her behaviour, it was a bit odd, but it was nothing to call a priest over. I forgot about it by lunch, and by the time I got home, she was her normal self. I didn't bring it up, and neither did she, and life went on. The next incident would happen 3 days later. It was around 2 AM, and I had woken up to get a drink. I was standing at the kitchen island, jug of OJ in hand, when I felt a strong feeling that I was being watched. For whatever reason, I looked down at the floor, and what I seen was my wife's smiling face staring back at me. She was peeking at me from the other side of the island, staring up at me with wide, unblinking eyes and grinning like a Cheshire cat. I screamed, I'll admit it, not out of irritation but of fear. For some reason at that moment, I was scared of my own wife. At the sound of my scream, Lynn scuttled backwards out of my view, her hands and feet smacking the floor tile as she hurried out the kitchen, on all fours. I didn't run after her or even yell after her. I just stood there frozen in shock, wondering what the F had possessed her to act like that. It took me a little longer than I'd like to admit to go back upstairs, but eventually I did. When I got to her bedroom, Lynn was lying on her side asleep, or at least she was pretending to be. I stood there for a while, watching her breathing to be sure that she really was asleep. I had the feeling that she might jump out at me the moment I had gotten into bed, but she didn't. I climbed into bed and she didn't even move. Her breathing was soft and deep, and I was starting to wonder if I had dreamt the whole thing. The next morning I waited for her to come down for coffee, and after handing her a mug and kissing her on the cheek, I decided to ask her about it. "So, what was that about last night?" I asked, keeping my tone light so I didn't offend or embarrass her. She frowned over her cup of coffee, shaking her head like she had no clue what I was referring to. "You were peeking at me again." "From over there," I said, pointing to the spot on the floor by the kitchen island. She followed my gaze, and when she looked back at me, she burst out laughing. She laughed so hard that I couldn't help but join her. "You creep me the hell out sometimes, do you know that?" I said. She giggled and set up her cup on the counter and wrapped her arms around my neck. "You creep me out all the time, so I guess we're even," she said. We said our goodbyes and left for work. As I drove, I kept thinking about how creepy it had been seeing her grinning at me from behind the island like that. The sounds her hands made on the floor as she crawled away. I told myself she was just trying to be silly. She was just trying to join me in my love of all things horror. It's not like I was afraid of her, but it still didn't sit right with me. I started seeing Lynn peeking at me more and more. Sometimes she'd be peeking out from behind the couch or the living room curtains. One time she even managed to get inside her grandmother's old trunk that sits at the foot of her bed. I might not even have known that she was there at all had the trunk's old hinges not given her away. She'd had the lid propped up just enough so that only half her face peeked through. She'd been grinning like an excited toddler. It was unnerving. I didn't even know what to say to her. All I could do was stare. Now, when I finally found my voice, I asked why on earth she was doing this. She didn't answer, but she slowly closed the lid, shutting herself inside the trunk. I just walked away feeling completely disturbed. I didn't understand why she was doing it, but it clearly made her happy. I just hoped that she would get tired of this game quickly. Lynn didn't peek at me for the next 2 weeks. I started to think that she was done with her weird prank, and honestly I was relieved. We were watching a show on Netflix one night and I jokingly said that I hadn't seen her peeking at me lately and that she must have given up her spy game. Lynn looked up at me with a small smile and said, "Maybe I've just gotten better at it." I didn't say anything, but I wondered whether or not she was actually joking. Had she stopped peeking or was she still peeking? For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. Was she still peeking at me when I wasn't looking and I just hadn't noticed? And if so, what the hell was she getting out of this? I started to feel paranoid, constantly checking whether she was watching from around the corner or behind the door. I was jumpy whenever I was home and she wasn't in full view of me. I felt stupid and honestly a little crazy. But after a few weeks without another incident, I began to relax. I stopped checking behind furniture and walls, and I told myself it was all just a bad memory. Then a few days ago, things had gotten much worse. Lynn had left to go to a friend's. I lounged on the couch and played a couple of games on my laptop. Around 9 PM I hopped in the shower, and as I was washing the soap from my hair, I felt that awful feeling that I was being watched. I slowly opened my eyes and almost had a heart attack. Lynn was peeking from behind the shower curtain, her entire head stretched into the shower, leaving just her body outside. Her long dark hair hung against the curtain, the ends dripping with water. Her mouth hung open in a terrible grin, eyes wide and red as if she hadn't blinked in ages. I screamed and I jumped back against the wall. She didn't move, nor did her smile waver. Her makeup ran down her cheeks in 2 black streaks. She looked giddy and completely deranged. I was frickin' terrified. We stood like that for a few moments, neither of us saying a word. Finally, after what felt like forever, She slowly pulled her head back out of the shower, and I watched her blurry figure through the curtain as she moved backwards toward the bathroom door. A second later, the bathroom door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the mirror, and I screamed again and jumped out the shower to lock the door. I stayed inside the bathroom for over an hour. Maybe to some of you, I've overreacted. But joke or not, I wasn't going to put up with that crazy crap anymore. That's what I kept telling myself as I paced in my bathroom, stopping to listen at the door every few minutes. Suddenly, I hear a muffled sound, and I press my ear against the bathroom door, straining to listen. I couldn't hear anything, but I envisioned Lynn standing on the other side of that door, giggling at her own joke. I felt a surge of anger. I was beyond pissed at being made to feel scared in my own house, and made to hide in a bathroom for over an hour. All for what? Some joke? And if it was a joke, it was an awful one. What the hell, Lynn? I snapped. This crap is getting really frickin' annoying now. I waited for her to apologise or to call me a jerk, but instead I heard a faint moan, so quiet, I wondered if I heard it at all, and then complete silence. Lynn? I called out, not being able to hide the shakiness in my voice. I got no response, just my own heavy breathing. I swear to God, Lynn, just frickin' stop it, I yelled, pounding my fist on the door. I waited for her to cuss me out. Something I would expect from me talking to her like that. I've never screamed at her before. But there was nothing. Just the occasional drip from the shower head. I won't deny that I was scared. I was too afraid to open the damn door and face my own wife. I waited another 30 minutes or so, which felt like a frickin' lifetime when you're scared. Finally, I decided I wasn't going to spend the night hiding in my bathroom, so I got down on my knees, I peered under the door. I had almost expected to see her face peeking back at me, but thankfully I didn't. I could see straight down the hallway to the top of the stairs, but no Lynn. I didn't know if I should be happy about that or not. I looked for a few minutes, waiting to see her head pop up over the top step, but it never came. I stood up. A hand was hovering over the door handle and I was mentally preparing myself to open it. I slowly turned the lock with shaky fingers, and I was about to yank it open when I heard a sound that still makes me feel nauseous when I think about it. A moan, louder than before, but this time I was able to tell where it was coming from. I turned my head to the closet door as if in slow motion and locked eyes with my wife, who was peeking out from me from the slight gap. Her eyes were still wide as ever and her mouth was hanging open in the most grotesque gaping smile I had ever seen. I didn't even scream. I was too scared for even that. Her hands were clasped to her chest, her body was trembling with sheer delight, as if she could barely contain her own excitement. A short, raspy moan bubbled up from her throat, deep and raw, sending a shiver through my entire body. Somehow I found the ability to pull the bathroom door open, and as I ran as fast as I could all the way down the steps, snagging my keys and phone from the table in the living room before running outside to my car. I could hear her shrill laughter behind me, but I didn't hear her getting any closer. I didn't bother to shut the front door. I drove away from the house faster than I legally should have, shivering the entire time. Either from fear or the cold, maybe a little bit of both. I hadn't grabbed my coat or even a pair of shoes. I was still in my boxers and my hair was still damp. I drove straight to my brother Chrissy's house, about 40 minutes away, ignoring any and every phone call and text that I got. I didn't check my phone until I was safely parked in my brother's driveway. Lynn had called 4 times and sent a flurry of texts, all wondering where I had gone and why I had left. I threw my phone at the dash in a rage, furious at her nonchalant attitude. My brother and his wife were surprised to see me, especially dressed in just a pair of my boxers, but told me to stay as long as I needed. Chris lent me some clothes and asked what had happened. I told him Lynn and I had a fight, but I didn't want to get into the details. I didn't want him to think I was overreacting, leaving my wife over a prank, even if it was a strange one. I mean, hadn't I encouraged her for a few years to lighten up instead of being so serious all the time? I had wanted her to relax and loosen up, but this was definitely not what I had in mind. I tried to sleep on their sofa, but my brain would not let me sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lynn's face staring at me from inside that closet. Knowing that she'd been in there with me the entire time made my skin crawl. She had never left that bathroom at all. Instead, she slipped inside the closet and slammed the bathroom door shut to fool me. The mere thought of going back home gave me anxiety. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Chris ended up giving me a sleeping pill so I would be able to get a little rest. My sleep was filled with terrible dreams, all of my wife's smiling face. I woke up just as the sun started to rise. My sore body ached from the sofa and I felt drained. I knew I'd have to call Lynn at some point, but I didn't know what I was going to say to her. I wouldn't be going home unless she gave me her word that she wouldn't do any more creepy crap. I just wanted my wife back. Her normal, serious self had never looked so good to me. I was contemplating calling her and telling her that when that familiar feeling came over me. I was being watched. I was staring at the ceiling, my heart was in my throat and I didn't want to look away, but the longer I ignored the feeling, the worse it got. My eyes drifted from the ceiling almost on their own. Her face was pressed up against the window beside the couch. She was staring at me with that same gaping smile. Drool dribbled down her lips, leaving 2 long streaks down the glass. I didn't know how long she'd been there, but something had told me that she'd been there quite a while. Possibly all night. I didn't bother screaming, though I was afraid. Anger trumped any fear I had in that moment. I jumped up from the couch and I pounded my palm against the glass. "Lynn, are you crazy? What the hell is wrong with you? Just go home." She didn't move, and her ghastly expression never changed. If anything, her smile only grew, as if she had been even more elated. I could hear Chris and his wife moving around upstairs, and as if Lynn could hear them from her place outside, her head twitched slightly in their direction, and she began to slowly close her mouth. Chris called my name from upstairs, obviously concerned. I turned to see him and his wife Rebecca hurrying down the steps. When I turned back to the window, Lynn was gone. The only sign that she had been there was the 2 streaks of drool still dripping down the glass. I tried explaining to Chris and Rebecca about waking up to see Lynn watching me through their window. They were sceptical. I mean, who wouldn't be? Chris and I went outside to the spot in front of the window, but there were no footprints in the dirt, just a slight indent. Animal probably, Chris had guessed, and I didn't argue. He and Rebecca had assumed that I had dreamt the entire episode, but they didn't understand and I was too tired to explain it. I called out of work that day and just turned my cell off. I didn't want to face Lynn. Just talking to her was too much for me at that point, and I really started to believe something was irreversibly wrong with her. That no matter how many promises she made, we'd never be the same again. That thought saddened me to my core, and I cried most of the morning. By noon, I figured I was ready to confront her. Give her one last chance to explain herself. I could at least give her that after 6 years, I told myself. So I turned my phone on and saw the dozens of texts that she had sent, all from a seemingly concerned wife. "Can we talk? I love you. Please call me. I'm really worried. Can you answer? Please just come home." And more of the same, all text telling me that she loved me, she wanted me home, how worried she was, not a damn one addressing the crazy crap she had pulled. Like she hadn't been acting like a character from a Stephen King book. Even her texts were different. She normally texted novels just to tell me to pick up a loaf of bread. You'd think she'd have more to say to me after these bizarre shenanigans. And I know it probably seems childish to some of you who are miles away from this situation, but if you saw the way Lynn had looked at me, how she scampered away on all fours like some wild animal, grinning at me from inside the closet like a lunatic, then I think you'd find my reaction warranted. I ended up staying with Chris and Rebecca for another night. I didn't wake up yesterday until afternoon, and thankfully I didn't see Lynn's face watching me through the window. I don't want to pry, because it's not my place. But is this fight something that can be mended? Rebecca had asked. She made us both a sandwich for lunch, and I knew she wanted to breach a subject without seeming nosy. I don't know. She's like a different person, I said, choosing my words carefully. I still wasn't ready for her or Chris to know the full extent of the batshit craziness I had been dealing with. People change, Ben, but she's still the same woman you married. Maybe you both just need to talk through your issues. Whatever's going on, I'm sure it can be fixed. Rebecca, acting like the peacemaker. I think it's beyond that now. I don't think talking would help. I just don't trust her, I said. That word stung my heart. I missed and loved my wife, but how could I live with someone like that, living in constant fear? That didn't sound appealing to me. Lynn loves you. She has to be absolutely crushed, she said. I don't know about that, I replied. Well, she certainly seemed like it to me. I've never seen her so upset, very much unlike the Lynn I know, Rebecca had said, shaking her head sadly. It took a full minute for her words to really sink in. And when they did, I felt dread worming its way through my skin. Wait, what do you mean? You saw her? You saw Lynn? I asked. My mouth was suddenly dry. Rebecca nodded casually as if that fact wasn't nightmare fuel. Maybe for her it wasn't. She stopped by this morning, just after Chris left for work, she said, cleaning the plates from the table. I didn't see her car though. Maybe she took an Uber or something. Beck, what did she say? Did she come inside? I asked, sweat starting to break out from my forehead. I began looking around, examining corners as though a predator lurked behind them. No. She just asked if you were awake yet, and I said that you weren't. I asked if she wanted me to wake you, but she said no. She just said to let you sleep. That's all. She didn't say anything else? I asked. No. She looked awful though. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, and I really think you should call her. I got up from the table and thanked Rebecca for lunch. I felt a little bit better at the knowledge that at least she hadn't come inside. Still, I needed to double check that the doors were locked. I sat for a while trying to figure out what to do next. I didn't want to go home, but I felt that I owed it to Lynn to help her if I could. Hadn't I sworn an oath to love and honour her through sickness and in health? Clearly my wife was sick. If she was sick, which I truly believe she was, I had to try and get her the help she needed. But I didn't even know where to start. I didn't want to call the police, and besides, what the hell was I going to tell them? That my wife was peeking at me? That she was being creepy? As bizarre as she'd been, she hadn't committed any crime. Not yet, anyway. The police would probably think I'm overreacting. But this wasn't some prank. It felt wrong, dangerous even, like something sinister lurked beneath my wife's smile. I knew as her husband I was well within my rights to have her committed, but what if she simply acted normal in their presence? She'd obviously been able to fool Rebecca into thinking that she was just a concerned wife, and as long as the doctors didn't find her a danger to herself or others, they'd have no choice but to release her after 72 hours. I felt lost and overwhelmed, so I did what any husband in my position would do. I called her mother. I didn't want to. You have to believe me. Her mother, Marianne, and I, we were never on the best of terms. We'd never fought or anything like that. She just wasn't a very warm person. She wasn't very easy to get along with. She hardly ever smiled, and when she did, only her lips would move into a thin-lipped smile, leaving her eyes as blank as before. She gave off this aura that felt like she was permanently on the offensive. I'd only met her twice, and both times were such short visits. I got the impression that she didn't approve of me for her daughter. Lynn would usher us out the door very quickly, like she didn't want me to be in her mother's company, like she didn't want me to feel uncomfortable, which I was extremely grateful for. Being in her mother's company felt almost unbearable, like walking on glass, and I was glad when we moved 3 states away so we didn't have to see her as often. I was happy to avoid that woman, but now I needed her help. I really didn't want to talk to her at all, but I had to talk to someone, and someone who knew Lynn better than I did, so I grit my teeth and I did what I had to do. Yes, she answered, already sounding irritated. Marianne, it's me, Ben. Do you have a minute to talk? I could hear her cluck her tongue as if she was irritated again. I'm in the middle of writing some checks, but if you insist, I suppose I can spare you a moment. What is it that you want to discuss, Benjamin? She said coolly. It's about Lynn. She's been acting strangely, and I was just wondering if you had any idea whether there was something. I was quickly interrupted. It's a bit difficult to follow your rambling, Benjamin. What is it that you want from me? I could almost see her standing there in a thin sweater and slacks, tapping her fingernails impatiently on the table. I wanted to know if you'd ever noticed any odd behaviour or possible mental health issues. There was a long, uncomfortable pause that I couldn't tell was because she was just thinking or because of something else. Finally, after a few seconds, she spoke. I'm not sure if this is one of your jokes, Benjamin, but if so, I don't find the humour in it. Now, I do have business to attend to, as I've said, so if you don't mind, but I cut her off before she could get rid of me. Marianne, this is not a joke. I'm sincerely concerned about Lynn's mental health. Her behaviour has been very erratic. I'm very worried about her, and I figured as her mother that you would be as well. My frustration at this point was evident in my voice. If you're truly concerned, then I suggest that you go to a health professional. I don't know what you expect of me, she snapped. I could tell she was seconds away from hanging up, and for some reason I was so desperate for her not to. I had the feeling she knew a lot more than she was letting on. Please, Marianne, if not for me, do it for Lynn. I heard a faint, shaky intake of breath as if she was trying to hold her steely persona together, but failing. Marianne, what's I started. Benjamin, I don't know what to tell you. My only advice would be to seek professional help. Do not call here again. Goodbye. I tried to call out to her, but she had hung up. I tried to wrap my head around the call and her refusal to help me. Even if she didn't like me, why wouldn't she want to help her own daughter? I couldn't understand that. I tried to replay the conversation, desperate to find something that I had missed. After a while, I almost gave up. Until I remembered her last words. Seek professional help. She'd said those words with a bit of urgency. I could just be grasping at straws here, but no. I was sure that her voice had changed ever so slightly when she said that, as if it had been very important. What had she meant? I assumed she was referring to medical professionals, but maybe she's referring to someone else, someone that she didn't, for some reason, feel comfortable saying directly. Or maybe I was just desperate. I waited for Chris to get home, and after a long, exhausting conversation with him and Rebecca, I convinced them that Lynn truly needed psychiatric help. I didn't tell them everything. I wasn't prepared to go into that just yet, but I did tell them about our last encounter, how she'd hidden in the bathroom peeking at me from the closet. They were obviously shocked, but thankfully they believed me. They too just wanted to help her. Still, they didn't think it was all that serious. Weird, maybe, but it wasn't dangerous. They just kept saying that Lynn had to be playing some kind of weird joke, maybe for YouTube, they had suggested. Chris didn't think that we should involve the police just yet. He offered instead to go with me, and I readily accepted. He reasoned that calmly talking to her, trying to coax her into going willingly, was the best course. I agreed to do it his way. At least I wouldn't be going into the house alone. We drove over this morning just after breakfast. There was no way I was going at night. When we pulled into the driveway, my stomach began doing somersaults. Her car wasn't there, but I still hadn't let my guard down. The front door was ajar, and for a split second I thought would see her eyes staring through the gap. I was shaking and starting to sweat. Chris, however, he seemed fine. He waited for me to open the door, his hands in his pockets like he was going on a stroll through a park. I envied his ignorance. I pushed the door open and was immediately hit with the stench of rot. Chris smelled it too, and he walked up into the house behind me with his nose scrunched up. What do you guys use to clean the floors around here? Oh my God, Chris mumbled. Shut up, I said, my eyes darting around for any signs of Lynn. The house was deadly quiet and dark, despite being 10 in the morning. The curtains were all closed tight, refusing to allow any sunlight inside. If I hadn't left it for just 2 days prior, I'd have thought this house had been abandoned. We moved through each room, carefully checking any place that she might hide, occasionally calling her name. Why the hell are you looking under the couch? Chris asked. Aren't we looking for your wife? He looked at me as though I was stupid. Let's just go upstairs, I whispered. He shook his head but followed me upstairs to check the bathroom and spare bedroom. On the way up, my shoes crunched over pieces of glass that looked to be littered over a few steps. I noticed that one of Lynn and my wedding portraits that were hung on the wall along the staircase had been smashed. The frame hung crookedly, all the glass removed. I stared at the picture and a lump started to form in my throat. We had taken that photo just after the church, after saying our vows. She looked so beautiful in her white gown. I looked at Lynn's beautiful face. I never dreamed her face would ever be a source of terror for me. We climbed the rest of the steps and I checked the spare bedroom, but it looked completely untouched. I was hesitant to go into the bathroom, my fear from that night coming back to me all at once. Chris noticed and offered to go in by himself, but I couldn't let him do that. So we walk in together, checking the closet, checking the shower, but the bathroom looks as though it hadn't been touched since the night I left. I don't think she's here, Ben. Why don't you just pack some clothes? We'll try coming back tomorrow or something. I nodded, I go into the bedroom and I shove some clothes into a duffel bag. When I checked inside her closet, I came across the source of that smell and I gagged. Chris took one look and lost all colour in his face. He had to go and stand by the stairs to get away from that sight and that smell. I gazed down in shock at what lay inside my bedroom closet. Soaking into the rug were at least a dozen eyeballs, all carefully laid out in pairs. Some were as large as a quarter, while some others were as tiny as a marble. I stared down at the eyes she had collected, clearly from small animals. I wondered how she had gotten them, and I shuddered at the thought. My God, man, I thought I had it bad with Becca's shoe addiction. But your wife's in here collecting eyeballs, Chris said whilst gagging. Ben, I think we need to go. I'm getting nauseous. All right. I grabbed my duffel bag and I shut the closet door on my new nightmare. I stepped out into the hall and took a deep breath of air. I could taste the rot on my tongue and I couldn't help but gag. Who the hell lines up eyeballs in their closet like that? I tried to tell you that she needed help, Chris. She doesn't need help, Ben. She needs a frickin' exorcist, he said. Are you coming or what? Because I can't stand that smell any. His words died in his throat, and his eyes grew wide with fear. I didn't ask him why, but I could feel it. Someone was watching me, and I didn't think it was the eyes in the closet. I turned around, my eyes slowly scanning the bedroom. Christ, I whispered, as I finally saw what we'd missed. Under the bed, curled on her side, watching us with excitement of a kid on Christmas morning, was my wife. She held her hands together just under her chin and they were shaking eagerly. Now that she'd been found, I could hear the quiet noises that she was making, a sort of hiccuping sound in her throat, as if the excitement was just too much for her. It was unnerving, to say the least. Wide eyes and that huge smile. Everything in me told me to run, but I forced it away. This was my wife. No matter how twisted, she was still the woman I married, and I had to help her. Lynn, I said softly. She didn't respond, but her head bobbled back and forth in two quick motions as if she were nodding. Baby, I just want to help, okay? Can you let me do that? I asked. I had taken a single step forward, approaching her as though she was a dangerous animal. I love you, Lynn, I said softly, taking another step closer. She let a tiny moan escape her wide-open mouth, and I had to resist the urge to run. Her shoulders were starting to quiver, and her eyes grew as large as saucers. I crouched down so I could see her better, and then immediately, I seen the blood. Her hands were covered in it. They trembled more the closer I got, as if she was barely able to contain herself. Lynn, are you hurt? You're bleeding, I said. She bobbed her head again, her bloody fingers moving up and down as if playing an invisible piano. They occasionally grazed her chin, leaving smears of blood all over her skin. I wanted desperately to recoil in disgust. The smell coming off her was revolting. I could feel vomit climbing up my throat. Her lips were dry, stretched thin, blood seeping between the cracks. I knew she wouldn't come out on her own, but I didn't want to leave her in there in the state that she was in. I scoot closer. I reach out to her. The excited hiccuping sounds got louder. Her hands shook, fingers flexing. It was then that I could see the blood oozing from between her fingers. Oh my God, Lynn, you're bleeding profusely, I said. Instinctively, I reached out to take her hand, but before I could even touch her, her hand sprang out towards me. A sharp pain shot through my arm and I fell back on my ass. My arm burned and I could see blood dripping down onto the carpet. I looked back at her in shock and saw her grinning madly, her fingers clutching a large shard of glass. Are you all right in there? Chris asked from behind me. I turned my head slightly and I nodded to him, cradling my arm to my chest. When I turned back to face Lynn, I saw that her focus had shifted. She wasn't looking at me anymore, and she wasn't smiling anymore either. She was staring past me, her eyes glaring at Chris the way a hungry lion might stare at an antelope. I got to my feet and I began walking backwards down the hall, afraid to take my eyes off her. Are you bleeding? Chris asked. The moment the words left his mouth, Lynn started fast scooting out from under the bed, the glass shard still in her fist. Chris, go, run, I yelled. He must have been too afraid to move because a second later I felt my back bump into him. He was still standing at the top of the stairs, staring at the horror that was my wife. Lynn had crawled completely out from under the bed and stood in the bedroom doorway. Her face twisted in rage. Her whole body was visibly tense and blood ran down her fingers onto the floor. Jesus, Lynn, Chris said. You playing hide and seek? I reached back and I pushed him towards the steps. Move your ass, Chris, I said quietly but as firmly as I could. Lynn bobbed her head in fast, sharp motions and began to grin, stretching her mouth open wider and wider so that her chin seemed to touch her chest. I heard Chris mutter a prayer and then he was running down the stairs. I stood at the top of the steps, stuck between the love for a woman who clearly needed serious help and self-preservation. I only want to help, I said, choking back tears. Her eyes focused on me once again as she slowly lifted the glass, holding it out in front of her, and then she started to sprint towards me, grinning with utter excitement. Thankfully, my body took over. I flew down the stairs, skipping 2 and 3 at a time. I made it to the front door before I felt her leap onto my back, wrapping her arms around my neck, her mouth open next to my ear so I could hear those terrible hiccuping sounds. I shook her off, knocking her to the floor. I felt a searing pain as my back as she went, but I tore open the front door and I bolted to my car. Chris was standing in the front yard talking on the phone with the police. I didn't say a word, I just ran to my car and jumped in. Chris took the hint and followed me, still on the line with 911. I watched the rearview mirror. I was sure that I'd see her there running after us, but I never did. I went straight to the ER, got 11 stitches on my arm and 3 on my back. The police asked a lot of questions and went back to the house to do a search, but of course, Lynn was nowhere to be seen. They advised me to stay with a friend or a relative for a while and file a restraining order as soon as I could, but none of those things would matter. Somehow, I just knew. I dropped Chris off at home and I went to a motel that was around an hour away. I wanted as much distance between me and Lynn as I could possibly have. This is where I've been for the last 4 hours. I thought maybe the police would find her, maybe they'd get her the help that she desperately needs. But now, I don't think so. Because 40 minutes ago, I got a text from an unknown number. Just 3 words. I found you. There was a picture attached. The picture was dark, it was grainy, but I instantly knew what it was. There was no mistaking my wife's eye. I started typing this out immediately after. I don't know what to do. I'm alone and I'm scared, and I just can't help the feeling that I'm being watched. What? First of all, how talented is the girl who wrote this story? Like, props to you. You're absolutely incredible. Long may you continue doing more, and I really want to keep sharing your stories because, wow. And Lynn, you creepy ass bitch. Hope to never see that face, ever. I'm kind of picturing Momo vibes and I'm not liking it. I'm not liking it at all. But that is it for the story of little creepy peaky Lynn, and God knows what she was getting up to. I wish there was like a second part to this story. I am going to hunt high and low and try and find one, because if there's not a part 2, we need a part 2. But then is the beauty, the cliffhanger? Maybe. I don't know. If you enjoyed this Friday Night Fright episode, if you want this to be an ongoing series, please let me know. If you do want any additional content on some Fridays, we could do a Friday Night Fright episode. Might be quite cute. Let me know. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe, get the notification bell on so you don't miss when I upload, because I have so many bonus episodes coming your way. Also, we've hit 17k, so thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It means the world to me. You mean the world to me, and I will never stop being grateful for the opportunities that you provide to me. But that is it for today. Please, please, please remember, be a good person. Do not be a bad person. Stay safe. Look after each other. Don't look at creepy Lynn, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!